You need to leave, Lauren. That's what my dad said, standing next to his new wife, pretending this wasn't my house. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the keys hanging by the door, the same hook where I used to hang my tiny pink backpack when I was 7, and quietly took them down. He didn't stop me. Neither did Deborah. Her son was already in the garage, blasting music. Her daughter had turned the study into a TikTok studio. And I was being erased. But what they all forgot was that the deed still had my name on it. Not theirs, not hers. Mine. So I left. Not because I had to. Because I had a plan. Now it's time to take everything back. My dad, Daniel Mitchell, wasn't a man of many words, but when he built something, it lasted. He bought the house when I was 10. Back then, it was falling apart. Leaky roof, chipped paint, weeds swallowing the backyard. Most people would have walked away. Dad saw potential. This house just needs someone to believe in it, he said. It sounded like he was talking about more than bricks and beams. Every weekend, we worked side by side. He taught me how to strip wallpaper, seal windows, and plant peonies that bloomed right before my birthday. He wasn't just fixing a house, he was building a place where I'd feel safe again, after Mom died. By the time I turned 16, we had repainted every room, reinforced the basement, and restored the wooden banister on the stairs. He even carved our initials into the back of the shed. DM plus LM, Builders of Home. Dad used to say, a house keeps standing when the people inside it care enough to protect it. At the time, I thought he meant storms or bad plumbing. Now I understand it's about people too. When I got into CU Boulder for civil engineering, he beamed like I'd won the Nobel. He said, one day, this house will be yours not just in memory, but on paper. And he meant it. A year after graduation, he surprised me. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to eat pancakes every Sunday, and he handed me a folder. Inside was the title deed. My name. Just mine. I want you to have this, he said. Not because I'm going anywhere, but because you earned it. This house is yours now. It was the proudest moment of my life. I hugged him so hard he almost dropped his coffee. I didn't think I'd ever need to defend that piece of paper. I didn't think I'd have to fight for a home I helped build with my own hands. But I was wrong. Because years later, someone else would try to take it from me. And worst of all, my own father would stand beside them. I met Deborah at my dad's birthday dinner, his 60th. She wore too much perfume and kept laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny. I tried to be polite. I even offered to refill her wine glass. She touched my wrist and said, "Oh, honey, you're such a sweet girl. Your dad tells me everything about you, almost like I know you already." I smiled, tightly, because I didn't know her at all. A month later, she moved in. Suddenly, the living room changed. Dad's books were boxed and replaced with scented candles and gold-accented throw pillows. The fridge now had kale juice instead of orange juice. The TV remote was always missing. But I stayed quiet. Dad seemed happy. After Mom passed, he hadn't smiled like that in years. Then came Ashton and Maddie, her kids from a previous marriage. They weren't kids, really. Ashton was 21, Maddie was 19, old enough to know better. Old enough to be dangerous in the way only entitled, idle adults can be. Ashton never spoke to me directly. He just strutted around the house with his headphones in, slamming doors and complaining about the Wi-Fi speed. He started setting up a podcast studio in the garage, me dad's garage. The one where we fixed the porch swing and built our first birdhouse together. When I objected, Dad shrugged. He just needs a space to create, he said. As if I hadn't created that entire garage with him. Maddie was worse. She moved into the guest room and instantly demanded a makeover. She painted over the soft yellow walls Mom had chosen, installed a neon ring light. I walked past her door once and heard her saying to her followers, "My stepsister's a total buzzkill. She doesn't get aesthetics." I wasn't her stepsister. We weren't family. We weren't even civil. And Deborah? She played innocent. Oh, Lauren, kids are messy, you know how it is. Then she smiled and added, you could always look for your own place. I mean, you're a successful woman now. That line hit me hard. Because this was my place. I paid the property taxes. I fixed the gutters. And I had the title deed tucked safely in my desk drawer upstairs. But it was starting to feel like I was the guest here. At first, it was little things. The coffee mugs, I loved the ones Dad and I collected from every road trip, vanished from the cabinet. Deborah claimed they were too chipped. She replaced them with pastel ceramics that said things like, live, laugh, love. Then Ashton added a do not enter sign to the garage door. He had soundproofed half the space, installed a second-hand mixing console, and started inviting friends over to record. I asked him once to move some of Dad's old tools out of the way instead of shoving them into a corner. He looked at me and said, chill, no one uses this stuff anyway. Except I did. Every spring, I'd use Dad's lathe to fix furniture. I once repaired a neighbor's antique chair on that very workbench. And Maddie? She turned the sunroomy mother's favorite reading nook into a backdrop studio for her TikTok dances. Ring lights, glitter curtains, a vanity desk in front of the window where the bookshelf used to be. When I opened the door one morning, she shrieked, excuse me? Privacy? Then slammed it shut in my face. Deborah called it creative expression. I called it invasion. What hurt most was how my dad acted like it was all normal. He'd nod along with Deborah's suggestions, laugh at Ashton's funny rants, and even help Maddie rearrange the living room for better lighting. I tried talking to him once. Told him how uncomfortable I felt. He looked away and said, Lauren, they're trying. You need to give them time. Time? They hadn't earned space, let alone time. The worst part? My Sunday mornings with Dad were gone. No more gardening, no more fixing creaky stairs or checking roof shingles. Now it was Deborah's yoga class, Ashton's podcast live stream, and Maddie blasting music for content. I stopped inviting friends over. I started staying late at work. I even began parking down the street to avoid the new chaos inside. Slowly, they weren't just living in the house. They were claiming it. And I was starting to feel like the stranger. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was too polite to fight back. Too silent to matter. They forgot whose name was on the deed. It happened on a Sunday. The one day I still tried to claim as mine. I came downstairs late hoping for silence, but the house was already humming with noise. Ashton's bass was shaking the floor. Maddie was doing some kind of dance in the hallway. And Deborah was on the phone, talking loudly about her new curtains. I went into the kitchen to make coffee. That's when I saw my childhood art magnets gone from the fridge, replaced with a chalkboard sign that read, The Mitchell Family Est, 2023. As if everything before her didn't count. I stood there staring at it when Dad walked in. Lauren, he said carefully, like he'd been rehearsing. Can we talk? He didn't wait for me to answer. We've been thinking, maybe it's time you consider getting your own place. Somewhere that reflects who you are now. Independent, strong. His voice shook slightly. Bigger things ahead for you. I blinked. This is my place. He glanced at Deborah, who'd just stepped in, arms folded across her chest. I mean, she smiled, sugar-laced. It's all of ours now, isn't it? That's when Ashton chimed in from the hallway. Honestly, Lauren, it's kinda cramped with 4 adults. You'd be happier with your own space. I looked at Dad, straight in the eyes. Is this what you want? He didn't speak. Didn't defend me. Just looked down at his coffee. So I walked to the wall, unhooked the spare keys, put them in my pocket, and said, Okay. Deborah smiled. Maddie clapped. Ashton said, Wow, that was easier than I thought. But I wasn't done. Because they all forgot something. I didn't need their permission to leave. And they certainly didn't have permission to stay. I didn't slam the door when I left. Didn't scream, Didn't look back. I just drove straight to my lawyer's office. I hadn't spoken to Ms. Jean Carter since she handled the title transfer years ago. When she opened the file and saw my name, sole owner, Shay looked up and said, "Well, they've made a big mistake, haven't they?" We spent the next 2 hours building a plan. Every detail, every photo, every dollar I'd spent on property taxes documented. We pulled utility records, maintenance receipts, even emails Dad had sent confirming I owned the home. She nodded as I explained what they'd done to the garage, the sunroom, and my mother's reading chair. "Don't worry," she said. "They don't stand a chance." But I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted my home back. And more than that, I wanted peace. So I stayed quiet. Over the next few weeks, I still stopped by. I didn't fight, I didn't argue. I simply watched. Watched Ashton drill into Dad's workbench like it was scrap wood. Watched Maddie use the living room as her branding lab. Watched Deborah sit at the kitchen table making plans to repaint the entryway a softer white. I kept my answers short, my smile polite. Meanwhile, I recorded everything. Every violation. Every change. I even took a photo of the shed door, where our initials D, M plus LM had been sanded off. They thought I was fading. But I was preparing. By week 3, I had what I needed. A stack of documentation, legal confirmation, and a notice ready to be delivered. 2 weeks. That's all they'd have. 2 weeks to leave the house they never owned. 2 weeks to realize the storm wasn't over. It was just waiting. I served the notice on a Tuesday. Slipped it under the front door, calm and precise. It was drafted by Ms. Carter, stamped, signed, and legally binding. "You have 14 days to vacate the premises." I didn't wait around. I didn't need to. The phone rang 5 hours later. It was Deborah. She didn't even try to sound civil. "How dare you, after everything we've done for this house." I let her vent, let her voice crack, and her words twist into ugly threats wrapped in false affection. "We made this place livable," she hissed. "Ashton rewired the garage. Maddie brought light and creativity to this tomb." I said only, "None of those changes were approved, and they depreciated the property." Then I hung up. 3 hours later, Dad called. He started with silence. Then, finally, "Are you really doing this?" My voice didn't shake. "You stood by when they erased everything Mom built, everything you and I built. I warned you. You just didn't listen." He sighed. "Not angry, just tired." "She makes me feel less alone," he muttered. "Ashton and Maddie, they fill the house." "They emptied it," I said. The next day, things escalated. I pulled up to find Deborah's church group on the front lawn, forming what looked like a prayer circle, but instead of hymns they were holding handmade signs. One read, "Family over property." Another, "Honor thy father." A woman I barely knew walked up to me and said, "Your mother would be ashamed." That one stung. Inside, the house had become a war zone. Boxes stacked high, Maddie crying on live stream, Ashton pacing like a caged animal. Even Dad looked like a ghost, floating room to room, unsure whether to pack or pretend it wasn't happening. Then the confrontation came. It was Ashton, of course. He stood in the doorway, blocking me. "You don't get it," he spat. "We've built a life here." I stared at him. Quiet. "You can't just kick us out. We've added value. This place is better now." I raised the folder in my hand. "Want to see the receipts for all the damage?" I opened to the photo of Dad's workbench gouged, paint splattered, broken. I flipped to the kitchen walls, now painted neon pink. Then the sanded shed door where our initials had once lived. Ashton fell silent. Deborah arrived next, arms folded, shaking her head like I was the child. "She's pregnant, Lauren," she whispered, motioning toward Maddie, who now appeared, belly round under a cropped sweater. "She needs stability. Do you really want that on your conscience?" I felt Dad shift beside me, uncertain, faltering. "I've given you all months of free housing. I said slowly. No rent, no responsibility. And this is how you repay me? By erasing memories? By gutting the soul of this house? No one answered. So I said it clearly. 4 days left. I suggest you use them wisely. On the final day, I came with Miss Carter, a locksmith, and a quiet man from a local moving company. The driveway was full. Deborah stood out front with 2 bags and a scowl. Ashton glared from the porch. Maddie sobbed in the passenger seat of a loaded Jeep. Dad came out last. He didn't meet my eyes. Didn't speak. But as he passed, he held something out, a folded note. Inside, it simply read, I lost sight, but you didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't cry. Not until I stepped inside. The house smelled like artificial lilac and fried onions. The curtains were gone. So were Mom's planters, the bookshelf, even the wind chimes. But the bones were still mine. And so was the silence. The house was quiet again. Almost too quiet. No bass vibrating through the floorboards. No ring lights flickering in the sunroom. No footsteps pounding down the stairs in the middle of the night. Just me, and dust, and memory. I stood in the garage first. It looked hollow. The pegboard was stripped, tools gone, sawdust swept up as if nothing had ever happened there. But I remembered everything. Every nail hammered beside Dad. Every weekend we spent trying to fix things that weren't really broken, just worn. So I started there. I called Mr. Tucker, Dad's old friend from the hardware store. He brought over his toolbox and his favorite coffee. Together, we began restoring the workbench. We reattached the clamp, replaced the warped shelf. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. The next week, I removed the pink paint from the kitchen walls. It took 3 coats of primer and a playlist of 2000s rock, but I finally brought back the soft sage green Mom loved. I found one of her old recipe cards wedged behind the stove, faded, oil-stained, still in her handwriting. I cried for the first time in weeks. And then I kept going. I restored the sunroom, removed the blackout curtains, brought in the bookshelf from storage, even dusted off Mom's rocking chair, and placed it where it used to be. The light poured in again. It didn't just look like home. It felt like home. I didn't hear from Deborah or the others. But Dad sent one more envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was me, age 11, covered in dirt, and holding a hammer too big for my hand. He'd scribbled on the back, "You always knew how to rebuild. I was the one who forgot." I placed it in a new frame and set it on the mantel. The house wasn't fully healed, neither was I. But with every repaired drawer, every polished step, I took something back. Not just what they'd stolen, but what I'd almost given up on. Last weekend, my niece came to visit. 8 years old, sharp as a tack, missing her 2 front teeth. She ran through the hallway with arms outstretched, shouting, "Auntie Lauren, your house is huge." I laughed. Not because of the size, but because for the first time in months it truly felt like mine again. We baked muffins together in the kitchen. She sat on the counter as I showed her the oven light trick Dad used to do when I was her age. Later, we read books in the sunroom. She asked why the rocking chair was extra old but extra shiny. I smiled. It belonged to someone very special. She loved this room, and now I do too. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. That night, I tucked her into the guest bed, the one I'd just refinished with sandpaper and stubbornness. As she drifted off, she said, "I want to have a house like yours one day. Not fancy, just full of stories." I stood there in the doorway for a long time. Because that's exactly what this house is. A story. Written in paint layers, creaky stairs, and pencil marks under the window ledge where my height was once measured every birthday. Not everyone gets to protect their story. Not everyone gets a second chance to reclaim it. I did. But it cost me. Most of my extended family stopped calling. Some say I was cruel. Others say I should have just let it go. Let Deborah stay. Let Ashton and Maddie grow roots. let peace outweigh principle. But silence isn't always peace. And family isn't always blood. I never wanted to be the villain. I never wanted to hurt my father. But I had to honor the part of him that chose me. The version of him that signed that deed, carved our initials into wood, and whispered, "One day, this will be yours." And now it is. Not just by law, but in every corner I've cleaned, every wall I've repainted, every quiet morning where the light streams in just right. I may never rebuild what was lost with Dad, but I can rebuild this house. And one day, I'll pass it down not just as a property, but as a place where strength lived, where memory refused to die, where one woman stood up, stood alone, and said, "Enough." Because sometimes, being the villain in someone else's story means being the hero in your own.